Patrick Doherty, 32. Jared Vincent Donaghy, 17. John Jackie Duddy, 17. Hugh Gilmore, 17. Michael Kelly, 17. Michael McDade, 20. Kevin McElhinney, 17. Bernard Barney McGuigan, 41. James Jerry McKinney, 34. William McKinney, 27. William Nash, 19. James Jim Ray, 22. John Young, 17. And John Johnson, 59.
Last year, the people of Derry marked the 50th anniversary of the Bloody Sunday massacre. The brutal attack by the British Army on unarmed protesters left 14 people dead and has been a source of anger and grief in the city for over half a century. Now, for the first time, following a 30-year campaign by the victims' families, one of the soldiers involved in the killings is facing trial for the murders of 2 young men and the attempted murders of 3 more. I went to Derry recently to meet those families, to visit the Museum of Free Derry, and to see for myself the streets where the killing happened. In this episode, I'm talking to Ciarán Shiels, who acted as a lead solicitor during the Bloody Sunday inquiry and personally represented 6 of the families of the deceased and 4 of those wounded. Shiels grew up in Derry himself and has close family connections to the events of January 1972. He shows me around the tight-knit neighbourhoods where the protesters lived, takes me down the route of the march, and explains in detail how the tragic scenes unfolded. I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're listening to Crime World.
My name's Ciarán Shiels. I'm a solicitor. I'm a director in Madden and Finucane Solicitors, who are based in Belfast and Derry, and I've worked there since 1998. I initially became involved through a job that I applied for in the Bloody Sunday Trust. I had been working and living in America for a considerable period of time. Came back in 1997, all in 1997. I'd been doing different jobs, had a law degree. I wasn't successful for the position, but the new inquiry, later became known as the Bloody Sunday Inquiry, the Savile Inquiry, was announced in January 1998, and I was approached by the people who I had interviewed with and said that there was a position available working for the families in the context of the new inquiry, and that I would be based in Madden and Finucane Solicitors, who at that time I think represented all the families and wounded, I think, except bar one. I interviewed for that job in just at the end of the same week that I applied for it. I interviewed on a Saturday and with Peter Madden, and I got the job. I started at 9 o'clock that Monday. It was my first case. I obviously threw myself into it. Right, so this area here would have been known as Free Derry, and it was all part of the no-go area. And on Bloody Sunday, there were 22 army barriers around, the entire area of the Craig and the Bogside and the Brandywell. At the time, the population of Derry at the time, there had been 55,000 people living within the Free Derry, the Free Derry area. There was no law and order in the official sense, other than that, from the locals, who had their own vigilante police force. They had their own citizens. They had their own radio station. They had their own citizens defence committee. They had their own community, essentially. And Free Derry was born really Firstly, in 1969, because of the attacks by the RUC on the community, and especially in April 1969, there was a man called Sammy Devaney who lived in William Street, which was where the sort of the main scenes commenced on Bloody Sunday. But because of what happened, Mr. Devaney, the locals barricaded the police out. Where we are now is the Cregan estate, probably one of the biggest housing estates in Derry. And the Free Derry area was basically 3 districts that are all joined together: the Bogside, the Brandywell, and the Cregan. And the Cregan in 1972 was a very much a brand new estate, but it was all part of the same electoral ward. Between the Bogside and the other 2 districts, this area was absolutely jammed with people. But the idea was that the Catholics were essentially all kept into the same ward because they only elected so many councillors.
So back then, were they was there industry, was there jobs, or were they?
The main source of industry would have been the shirt factories and textiles. For men, there were very few job opportunities. For women, mainly working as factory girls. In the 60s, the early 70s, those industries were thriving then, but there was still widespread unemployment within the city as a whole. I'm from the Cregan estate in Derry City. The bulk of the victims are from the Cregan estate. There's a number from the Bogside, but by far the vast majority are from Cregan. Both sets of grandparents were on the march. Both parents were on the march, and all my extended family. My father, 2 of my uncles, and my grandfather would have been considered to be very significant witnesses, to the events. And they were significant witnesses. They were all called to give evidence, oral evidence, which was traumatic, nerve-wracking thing for your ordinary person in the street to have to come and do that. So it was good to be able to help them a bit and make sure that they were at least going to be treated right. The march started in that place where we doubled around Central Drive. It came down through this area here, known as Rathlin Drive, and as it sort of wound its way gradually down towards the city centre, the stated end where they were marching to was the Guildhall in Derry. The city centre of the city was generally, a place where local traders were members of the unionist community. They were concerned that there could be trouble after the march, and that premises which were becoming business premises which were becoming fewer and fewer, could be damaged. And the local traders had met the Commander of Land Forces, Major General Sir Robert Ford, on the 7th of January to voice their concerns about the amount of premises which were being burnt as a result of rioting, and how the city centre was gradually becoming smaller and smaller and smaller as the ghetto area of the Bogside and the riots which would start there at the junction of William Street and Roswell Street typically. The stated objective of the march was to march to the Guildhall, and many people say if they had have just let them march to the Guildhall, the level of violence and that really escalated exponentially after Bloody Sunday would never have hit the.
Was there people kind of waiting to join the march that came down this hill? It's very hilly.
Yeah, no, but you kind of sort of know that before you start.
You get used to it.
Yeah, you get used to it.
Very hilly then.
Yeah, but
were people joining it all the way down?
All the way down, and by the time it hit the Brandywell, which is where it was at least 20,000 strong.
How many started?
I think probably about 10.
At the time, was it surprising? Was it a lot more than was expected?
It was the biggest that there had been. It was the biggest that there had been. There had been huge rallies before. But I mean, there was a real feeling about this particular march, and Derry. I mean, it wasn't just Derry people either. I mean, there were buses from Belfast and Newry, and people, civil rights members would have travelled and travelled to attend this, this march. People would talk about Bloody Sunday as an event or a commemoration march or whatever, but they never ever really talked to anyone about what they themselves actually saw on the day and the things that things that they experienced on the day. In that sense, it was a subject that was never spoken about. So I mean, it assisted greatly that it was the witnesses were effectively talking to one of their own, who and they knew that that we would always try our best for them and wouldn't allow them to be abused or treated in the way that they had been treated. At least those who came forward and gave evidence and had dealings with the Widgery Tribunal in April '72, so that helped. You were trusted, and you knew the terrain. I mean, like the English lawyers, etc., who had to come into this area, knowing nothing about it, who wouldn't have been comfortable walking the streets that we were walking this morning. They had to do it all by photographs and try and learn the geography and the topography, themselves as they went along. Plus, we could just simply walk over and see if something was right or not. So it assisted no end in that. Also assisted in getting barristers who weren't from Derry, mainly based in Belfast, getting their heads around the topography and sometimes names. Could have two, three different, to one name and two nicknames, certain places. Like as we look out the window here, this is the junction of William Street and Roswell Street. The venue for many of the thousands of riots in this city that have taken place, nicknamed Aggro Corner by the British Army. Then the Derry Young Hooligans, as the gang of them were known, who were like the semi-professional rioters in the city. They also called it Aggro Corner because the British soldiers were calling it Aggro Corner. And other areas like that, was maybe 2, 3, multiple actual names for it. If you weren't from the city yourself, you'd be wondering where the hell they're even talking about. The march turned right and passed down here at about 3:30 in the afternoon, and you can see the city centre just up here, and you'll be able to see the Guildhall, which was the stated aim, but there were stewards at the bottom of where William Street connects with another street called Roswell Street, and stewards there stood arm in arm, preventing the march from taking its stated route and redirecting it back up Roswell Street to Free Derry Corner. Now there was a group of approximately 300 broke their way through that barrier and proceeded on down to William Street and across to Little James Street to riot. Now, rioting in Derry was a day and daily ritual. Generally, it would start at 3 o'clock. It was known as the matinee, especially the weekend Saturday matinee, and that was a tradition that went right through the 70s. In this street here, in Great James Street, this is where the paras were stationed, and they had been driven down from Belfast, from Palace Barracks, from early in the morning, and they proceeded down in pigs. Those are like Humber pigs, but they're armoured British Army, armoured personnel carriers, Bedford softskin lorries, Ford armoured cars. It was essentially the A, B, C and D companies of the parachute, the 1st Battalion of the Parachute Regiment, and also support company. The support company, what does support company do? Well, it's the clues in the name, it supports. They're not just an infantry battalion, or they're not just an infantry company, rather. They're a part of the battalion that supports by the use of anti-tank, anti-expertise and anti-tank weaponry, the use of mortars. So an anti-tank platoon, you had a machine gun platoon, you had a mortar platoon, and you also had quite a large platoon of about 36 men. Generally about 18 men to a platoon. but there was a large platoon, there was composite platoon, was equally referred to as Guinness Force, which was your cooks and things like that, mainly older paratroopers, which was also involved in the latter stages of the shooting. Now, this street that we had come across here, Little James Street, it had a barrier number called Barrier 12. Now, Barrier 12, Barrier 13 at Sackville Street there, and Barrier 14 were the main barriers in terms of where the action actually occurred. So the march came pouring down this street here, and there were paras stationed over in this building here, which really backs on to the General Post Office, the GPO. Right in this, now there were many burnt out buildings because of the rioting that had been going on from 1969. There had been a bakery there known as Stevenson's Bakery. There were 8 members of a machine gun platoon that were stationed within that bakery, the burnt out bakery known as Stevenson's. It was a 3-story building, and they're relevant for the first shots that were fired. When the first shots rang out, the first person to be shot in Bloody Sunday was 16-year-old Damien Bubbles Donaghy. He had a contract signed, I think possibly it was Derby, but he was going to be he had got an apprenticeship as a professional football player in England. He was shot in the leg. That was the end of his professional career prospects, but he was shot in the leg. He had been throwing stones at the paras, and
where did the first shots come from?
Right here.
Yeah.
Fired diagonally. Bubbles, as I call him, Damien, he shot in that area there.
So was he right at the beginning of the march then? He was right at the front?
No, the march had already turned the corner here.
To the right?
To the right, and there were more responsible people. The older people were making their way up towards Free Derry Corner. They would have been setting up the lorry, with the speakers would have been on top of the flatbed, getting ready for, until they felt that they had as many people up there as they were going to have. So quite a lot of people were already around the corner doing what the stewards had asked of them. And the younger people and not so young we're here to get to the Guildhall. That's the way we're supposed to get to the Guildhall. Yeah. What you would expect. And stones then would have started to be thrown. Young people had made their way over here. They were throwing stones. They had a couple of big sheets of corrugated iron for protection from rubber bullets. And the British Army had started to fire CS gas, which was a normal thing for this area. It's why you see so many people with handkerchiefs. The handkerchiefs are dipped in water and vinegar. Okay. To protect people from the gas. Bubbles had been shot here. John, the older man, he was 59. He was the oldest victim on Bloody Sunday. He died in June. It's often said he's the 14th victim. He died of his injuries. He didn't actually die of his injuries. He died of cerebral hemorrhage. These 2 people were carried through the gaps in these houses and into a woman called Bridget Shiels' house. She's like an aunt or something. Yeah. They were both carried into her house at 8A Colmkill Court. And if we just move down here, the amount of confusion that would have been happening was just hard to take in. It's the days before, advanced communication, no mobile phones, talk, gossip, panic rumour. We on telephone in the street. Who's dead, who's not dead? Who says they saw your brother dead? Your brother walks under the house going, thank God, I'm home. Because you happened to be wearing the same clothes as somebody else.
So the injured are taken in there.
And they go to Colmkill Court.
Yeah.
Yep. The rioting continues down here. And it peters out after about 20 minutes.
Right.
There are no petrol bombs thrown. There's no nail bombs thrown. there are no shots fired. So that's what I'm saying. It's a minor riot by Derry standards.
Yeah.
They realise that they're not going to be able to drive the APCs through.
Yes.
So therefore, they have to come straight up the road and through barrier 12. Now there's a concern because the rioting is stopping, and even the rioters are getting fed up. It's freezing too. It's January. They want to go up and they want to see what's going on up at the marches. This is the thing that's going to hit you as you go up here. How short and small an area this is. And on the left-hand side of the street here, you had the Roswell Flats, which are the huge, 9-storey flats, like Divis Flats.
Yeah.
It's like a smaller version of Divis Flats in Belfast. Now, 9 minutes past 4, Colonel Wilford gives the order. Colonel Wilford is in contact with Brigade, and Brigade are across the water at Ebrington Barracks, which is the place that I showed you in the way in, where the British Army headquarters were at the time. What had happened was, such was the concern that the crowd were making their way down towards Free Derry Court, and riots are also in this city anyway. You've got 25 people rioting and 300 people watching them. It's like I said, it's done rubbernecking, you know what I mean? And so many of the rubberneckers, having seen 100 Derry riots, weren't too impressed with this one, and they were making their way on. But this was a concern for the soldiers because they were losing sight of the people they arrest. Colonel Wilford, he's been a former member of the SAS who had went back into a normal regiment. I think there was a certain arrogance towards 8th Brigade, the 8th Brigade commanders, because they were seeing in Belfast their soldiers standing with red shields and being absolutely pulverised day and daily by Derry teenagers throwing stones at them. And this was an absolute mortification and an insult to the parachute regiment soldiers who were saying, that would never happen to us. And there was a clear distaste for the way Derry is being run by the local soldiers, and that had been evidenced by General Ford in his ratings when he came down to see the Strand Road traders earlier in the month, that he was very, very annoyed and disappointed in the attitude of the local commanders. As a more moderate city, the RUC were in comparison to Belfast, were more moderate. There was an understanding to a degree between the political and civic leaders, such as Hume and McKinney and the Civil Rights Association, and the local Catholic commander of the police. So it was softer, and I think that permeated down to Wilford from Ford. You want to see the way these idiots are running it in Derry, and they need to be shown. And I think that informed the decision from Colonel Wilford to go in without having been ordered. He ordered his troops in 2 to 3 minutes before he got the order from 8th Brigade. That's why you see the soldiers from C Company running up William Street who are not part of support.
And they don't seem to really know what to do. They don't really...
The shooting's already started. Because you see Father Daly already carrying... part of the group carrying Jackie Duddy down. He's the first to be killed.
He's 17.
He's 17. But that's why there's such a disconnect.
For somebody who was so used to following orders, he jumped ahead.
Yeah, because he saw the
moment.
moment.
Arrogance.
He saw the moment passing.
He saw the moment passing.
I think
and it was going to pass him by completely.
Yeah, before they brought all these fucking people down here, I'm not going to get a chance to show anybody how to do anything.
So don't move
because
now.
I'm listening to this pedantic idiot who can't see what I see over in the waterside, and fuck him, basically. There's footage actually of Lieutenant N firing the first shot here, and he fires it in Chamberlain Street, and that's, if you see the evidence of Mitchell McLaughlin standing there, and he says the bullet just passed his head and took the brick out of that first, just above that first window, and that's when Mitchell was standing. He says, and the echo of that shot just went straight down Chamberlain Street and under the sort of big vortex of the Roswell Flats.
So he was in position here then?
Yes, he was in position here. They ran out they debussed the first pig. They immediately, and you'll see this on the telly, start pumping, but the rubber bullets, they just start puffing smoke. And you see them being discharged, and discharged at anybody and everybody, Knights of Malta, old people, 6 people. That's what their big arrest operation. Got 6 people in the open ground were arrested, battened, and brought towards the pigs. Well, the first person to be shot, as people start running through, as the pirates start running through, Father Daly's running, Jackie Duddy's running, and Jackie Duddy's, I think Father Daly said, he could feel this kid laughing at him. Laughing at laughing at, how you doing? Laughing at the priest running. Because it's quite funny. And the next thing, this is the wee boy just skidded in front of him, and then he had been shot in the shoulder, and the bullet exited his chest. That was Jackie Duddy. He was shot from Sergeant O's pig. First shot had been down there. Mitchell McLaughlin and about 4 or 5 others gave evidence about this brick being taken out of the wall. Jackie Duddy, sorry, I just forgot one thing. Jackie Duddy's shot up here at the back end of this row of houses, and this is as it was. The only woman to be shot on Bloody Sunday, Peggy Deary, she was shot and very, very, very seriously wounded. She was shot through the leg and it had an artery. She'd just been widowed. She's 38. She's 14 children. Blew the whole back of her leg out. Her hamstrings and all. She was very severely wounded, and she was carried around that corner into number 36 Chamberlain Street, which is the house that we'll see at the end. And the thing about it was, so many of them were from Craigan. Craigan was just like an open air wake. The sight of all the coffins in Craigan Chapel, it's very, very dramatic, and it just hit you, the amount of loss that arose from it. The funerals and the pouring rain. The Derry Journal said even the skies wept or something was the headline. And all the while these people were getting labelled as gunmen and bombers by people who literally weren't fit to lace their boots. The British Information Service, which operated from New York, it already had released a report that 4 of the dead were on the wanted list. I never saw a wanted list before, but I mean that was one of the big headlines. But what made it different was they'd done this in front of the media. There were so many camera crews. There was at least 3 camera crews on the ground, ATN, 2 from BBC. There were amateur photographers. There were people from the print media. There were photojournalists like Gilles Perez from Magnum Photos, Fulvio Grimaldi, Bill Rukeyser, JP Morris, who were right in the thick of the action and who kept working under fire, and managed to get some of the most dramatic and useful photographs, which we were able to deploy to devastating effect, many years later.
I mean, they were like, I suppose, caged animals that had been let out.
They were, but this is
morning for them must have been.
Yeah, and they thought they were getting away.
Yeah.
No, they thought everybody was getting away. So this is as we walked down Chamberlain Street. We had been walking out to the three blocks of the flats, and so you have Jackie shot about here. Mm-hmm. You have got Peggy Deary shot about here. You have Lieutenant then firing across, from here through the gap to where we are there. So Jackie is shot here. Now this is exactly as it was. Number 36 Chamberlain Street is the house here at the end. At the time of the group is tending to Jackie Duddy, Peggy Deary has been shot and has been carried around this gable and into that living room, and she's being treated there by a local chemist, Otto Slingvine.
So this was essentially the end of where you could go, was it?
Well, this was the car park.
Was there ways out?
Yeah, there was people were trying to get out through the gap between blocks 2 and 3
Yeah.
and blocks 1 and 2, or you could get into the stairwells of the flats, which were packed.
But it was a bit of a, I mean,
A squeeze. I mean, it was a crush.
yeah.
You know,
And you could have gone down this way knowing they were there.
well, you couldn't go down there. I mean, you'd be taking. I mean, that's where they were. That's where the danger was.
Yeah.
Another man called Michael Bradley, he comes out and he seems to lose the head too. And he throws two stones in the area of Sergeant Doe's pig, and they open fire on him, and he's shot through both arms and the chest, and he is taken through the gap between blocks 2 and 3 and in the house and church business. He survives. He's dead now, but he survived, and those are the casualties
From here.
from here. But it hasn't really started yet.
Right.
You know, I mean, especially like when you see like the ambulances coming in. If you ever see the footage and all the people carrying bodies in, and or the Glenfarrell Park victims, all those bodies being carried into Abbey Park, 3 houses in Abbey Park jammed with bodies. Joseph Place, two bodies. They're wounded. All the ones on the street that was just picked off the street. 36 Chamberlain Street, such that tiny little house. They had over 20 arrestees, prisoners, taken from it who were then brought down to charged for being rioters. Of course, all the charges were all eventually dropped against everyone in August 72, but those people lived with the pressure of that upon them, that they were, as well as being traumatised and witnessers of a massacre. They now faced the prospect of doing 6 months in jail for rioting, which was the going rate, the mandatory sentence that was imposed for rioting. Well, one can only take a guess at the sort of chaos and misinformation, disinformation, propaganda, that was being pumped out, and exploited, even the bigger extent again, by army information services and propagandists. And the thing about it, they couldn't have shot more innocent people. Everybody in the district knew they weren't involved. We didn't need to have an inquiry to tell us that. We knew, because the people just couldn't have been more innocent. And but yet they were the people who had to shoulder that problem, and I'm just glad we were able to help them. And I said he'd be over there, hadn't really got going yet, still hadn't got going. So now at this point, 5 dead at the barricade. If Jackie Duddy dead over here, and William Nash's father, he had a family wedding the day before. But he went out to his son, who was lying dead on the barricade, and there's footage of him, I just turn right here, footage of him sort of, waving at the soldiers to stop shooting with the low wall, and then he himself is shot, and he shot through the arm, and he survives. Now, at this time, Michael Kelly's body's being carried through Glenfarrell Park. Now, EFG and H form what's known as a brick. And they have a body system. F and G are bodies, and E and H are bodies. Now, F comes through that gap there.
Yeah.
And his buddy, Soldier G, comes through that gap there. And they take Glenfarrell Park as the people are running for that exit down here.
Was this car park wasn't here?
This is exactly as it was.
Was the railings here?
They were
Okay.
different railings, but they were there.
So F is coming in like literally like a...
Yeah. And Soldier H came in behind him, firing from the hip. Mm-hmm. Firing. A lot of soldiers talk about the soldier firing from the hip. And Soldier H fires 22 rounds in here.
Right.
He fired 19 shots at the same gunman. He was pretty fucking suicidal. Like, every time he's fired it, he goes back to the same. The story repeats itself until he gets him in the 19th round. But there's no windows broken.
Right.
In Glenfarrell Park. Not a single one. All of the victims in Glenfarrell Park are shot right to left. Mm. There's none of them face on. It's like throwing a bomb or anything.
So they're running.
As they say, they're running. They're running for there. Because that gap was at the time was a gap.
How many people were running through here?
I think I would say about 80.
Right.
And there's another 25 petrified, not moving at that gable, and they become the prisoners, the more riders who've been arrested. So you've got 20 riders hiding in 36 James Street, and you've got another 22 riders, who are arrested, petrified, afraid to move, including 2 priests at that gable wall. I mean, the one priest has given the 5 bodies out there absolution from the big gable end. It's a pitiful thing. G opens fire from this end. F opens fire from this end. Joe Friel appears to be the first to be shot. He's shot through the chest, passes through his chest and out the other side of his chest, just beside his heart. And he manages to get through, running in the Abbey Park. Now, Lord Widgery concluded that's another thing. Concluded that all the people who were killed in Glenfadda Park, 2 people were actually killed through this gap in Abbey Park. That was Jared Donaghy and Jared McKinney by Soldier G. And again, we know that because, unfortunately for Soldier G's bullet was found in Jared Donaghy's spine. It never passed through. But Soldier G never admits shooting anybody in Abbey Park. Just the way Soldier F in his first 4 statements never admitted to opening fire on the barricade. Not one round. But his first victim shot dead on the barricade. And he fires 13 shots. And every shot he has at a particular gunman or bomber, or 2 shots at a gunman or bomber, and they're very an apple pie order. And this presents a difficulty because on the 19th of February, forensic reports obtained from the first forensic science laboratory tying F to the shooting of Michael Kelly. But the difficulty is because the press has photographed Michael Kelly where he's very clearly shot and where he's been carried to. So what then of Soldier F's accounts? Well, Soldier F had then remembered that he didn't just shoot Michael Kelly. In fact, he shot another 4 people as well who he'd forgotten about. But he still expended the same amount of rounds. So he had to reorder all his shots. And hence the reason why the families did not get the statements from the Widgery inquiry, because his earlier statements... They're all lies. All of these statements are lies because, the person that he now remembers firing, the unarmed 17-year-old who shot at the rubble barricade, Michael Kelly, who clearly had nothing in his hands, is in the act of throwing a lit nail bomb. Now, if that happened, why didn't F say it happened? Because it would have been an entirely lawful act to shoot him dead. He was carrying it would have been within the yellow card. It's not because it didn't happen. It's all lies. But that's when it all really started to badly unravel. When the forensic science findings went out, tying such a small number of them to specific murders. Now, Soldier F shoots Joe Friel. Another soldier who we don't know, but it's one of the 4, shoots Michael Quinn in the face. He was a 17-year-old grammar school student, St Colm's College. He later became a very, very successful banker in Dublin. And he was shot through the face and the bullet went out his nose. And he managed to get through that gap. Also, very, very badly wounded. Michael actually was up from Dublin at the Soldier F hearing there. He goes to them all now, like he's retired. And I have photographs of Michael in Glenfadda Park. In fact, I have one here. This is Michael Kelly's body being carried through Glenfadda Park. The soldiers are just about to come through. That's Michael Quinn standing quite inoffensively at where these slats are here on the side of the road. And this is Jim Ray.
And what about this child here?
His name's Gregory Wilde. I went to Germany and got a witness statement from him. He just died. And he was a very, very important witness. These people, this is for the gas. But this is Jim Ray, who's just about to be murdered by Soldier G. And he shot right at the corner of the 2 curbstones down at the bottom here. But again, you can see his hands. You know,
He looks like he's trying to call the child to get the child, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Just come the other direction or something.
But whatever he's doing, he's not armed.
No.
Now, there's only one person shot at this side of the car park, and that's a man called Patsy O'Donnell. He's shot through the shoulder. He's one of those arrested. But Joe Mahana's alive. Mm-hmm. And he pretends he could see the feet coming towards him. The soldier with the albino hair.
Jesus.
And the gas mask pulled up. Now, there was a witness, he became a teacher. He was hiding in a bin. He was a 15-year-old child at the time. He was hiding in a bin. And there was an old lady up there at that walkway. And she could see that Joe Mahan was alive. And she says, son, pretend you're dead, son. And your man was there. And he seen the feet.
Who's the albino hair?
Soldier G.
Oh, was he an albino?
Very blonde hair. Jim Ray, unfortunately, after having been shot, raised himself up and he put another 2 rounds in his back at point blank range. You can see there's bullet holes here. Made it also made you more determined to get the truth, because at times you were sitting thinking, what a task, of taking on here is maybe not the responsibility of taking on, but better not mess this up. There were times I felt overwhelmed, but it was never something that I was going to work through. One of the biggest tasks, and the most laborious tasks, were the closing submissions. That was just 8-10 weeks of hell. Draft after draft of submissions, and our closing submissions were very, very good, and they've been largely adopted as the inquiry's findings. But that task in particular, I would say, if any of them were overwhelming, it was that. Most of the other things, the important things I did, like for example, like preparing Soldier F's cross-examinations, etc., they were big tasks. But you threw yourself into it, and I wouldn't say it was enjoyable work, but it was hugely rewarding, and really rewarding when you see the effect of it. Come June 2010, that was a momentous day. I don't think there'll ever be a case like it again. It was epic. What you were dealing with, you have to remember, because as a young lawyer dealing with this first case, you've been round, I've had you round the place. It's about the size of 2 football pitches put together. It didn't kick off until approximately 4:10. By 4:30 it was all over. And what you were dealing with here was a mass murder scene, put the size, approximately the size of 2 football pitches, in which the British Army's Commander of Land Forces and the IUC's Assistant Chief Constable were in close attendance. And the perpetrators were allowed and facilitated to get away by justifying their actions on the activities and the presence of the innocent victims whom they shot. And it was an obscene. It was an obscenity that needed to be put right. It was also very, very enraging at times to see just particular acts of cruelty or human indifference. But also, as a lawyer, to see how badly the families were treated, and how badly their faith and their good nature and their trust was abused by Lord Widgery, and the inquiry that he set up at the behest of Ted Heath and Lord Carrington. He reminded Lord Widgery that we were fighting not just a propaganda war, not just a military war in Northern Ireland, but a propaganda war also. That inquiry of 1972, which was set up to investigate a matter of urgent public importance, was not just substantively corrupt, it was procedurally grossly unfair because of the non-disclosure of material that the families really was their entitlement and it was their right to have it and to deploy against certain witnesses when one knew that they were not telling the truth. When you were confronted with that, it just made you knuckle down. I'm not saying that there weren't times you were saying, well, I've had enough of this. That there were. But you always come back to it like a day or two later and just said, right, I have to knuckle down, I have to get this done, I have to get this job over. And there were times you thought this was never going to end.
They still rounded up the prisoners after with the bodies lying on the ground and everything.
Well, they went over and shot 4 people, then another 4 people.
Right.
Across the street. With the prisoners right in front of them.
Mm.
But this is my granddad carrying Jim Ray, who was executed here at his feet into these houses. That's my other uncle carrying Willie McKinney, who's just behind. And you'll also see Joe Mahan, coming in. And this is the man, Jerry McKinney, who they think has taken a heart attack and is being treated for suspected heart failure on these low steps here. Now, F then murders these people from this lamppost across the street. But I'm going to take you into the museum here now. That's at the door of it. The day itself was, it'll stay with me for all of my days. We had to be inside the Guildhall chamber. I haven't been searched, haven't went through security, like airport type security, we went through all that. We had to be at our seats, and we had the Guildhall chamber was just full of tables and chairs for the families and the wounded, who were not due to come in until 9:30. So we had a 2-hour private read of the content of the report, which itself ran thousands and thousands of pages. So we had 2 hours to assimilate that information and be able to advise families about it, and that was a hell of a task. But we got it done. We there's a lot of jumping to conclusions, and then if a particular conclusion seemed absolutely brilliant, you might go to where it was referred to then and within the main body of the report. And also, there were a few things in there which were bad results for us. But overall, the experience was hugely rewarding, hugely satisfying, huge responsibility. Our clients had no longer just been clients, and we had become friends to this day. They were an honour to represent. Now, they were not a volunteer group of people. They were people who were thrown together by circumstance and very, very tragic and terrible, a terrible thing that was done to them, and to be part of something where you righted a big wrong for your people. I wouldn't change it for the world.
My name is Mickey McKinney. I'm a brother of Willie McKinney, who was murdered on Bloody Sunday. I was at the march, and I think I was probably lucky enough. I had just moved off just before the fires come on. I was standing at the entrance of Fara Park at 4 o'clock when they fired the gas. And I crossed over and I met my girlfriend then, who's now my wife. Because of the effects of the gas, she suggested to me, we'll make your way to your aunt's house, who lived in the Wales, which is just beyond Free Derry Corner. And we got on there. I think maybe just we got on this in Collins Wales, the whole thing went mad. People were running, screaming. We got into the house. You're only talking about a wee 1-bedroom here, and there must have been 20 people in it. And I hear people saying there, within minutes, there's 6 dead at the barricade.
Last year, the people of Derry marked the 50th anniversary of the Bloody Sunday massacre. The brutal attack by the British Army on unarmed protesters left 14 people dead and has been a source of anger and grief in the city for over half a century. Now, for the first time, following a 30-year campaign by the victims' families, one of the soldiers involved in the killings is facing trial for the murders of 2 young men and the attempted murders of 3 more. I went to Derry recently to meet those families, to visit the Museum of Free Derry, and to see for myself the streets where the killing happened. In this episode, I'm talking to Mickey McKinney, whose brother Willie was shot dead on that day in January 1972. Mickey has been a leader of the family's campaign for justice since 1992, and he spoke to me about the terrible loss of his eldest brother, the efforts that have been made to get justice, and the challenging prospect of Soldier F's murder trial. I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're listening to Crime World.
So Willie was he wanted to be a photographer.
He had an interest in photography. He was a typesetter in the journal office. Willie was a big John Hume man. Me and my younger brother were something else back then. He never took part in a riot. And he never took part in a riot. Never threw a stone in his life. Me and the other boy did. Willie was a very inoffensive. There was no violence or there was nothing of that in our Willie. Just a lovely person.
Did he have his camera?
He had a Sony Super 8 camera with him. He was at McGilligan the week before. Him and Joe, my younger brother, were at McGilligan the week before, and they witnessed what he recorded. In fact, I think they used it for his footage at the inquiry. I have memories of both Willie and Joe and myself. We would have landed in the house at lunchtime. We were all working around. It would have been the talk bag stuff, going out then. And I have vivid memories of the reports coming from Stormont, Brian Faulkner. This merchant Sunday will not be tolerated. I remember that. And there was a lot of unease coming up to that day, because we knew the message was being sent out. Keep in mind, marches and parades were all banned at that time. They weren't allowed. And as best I remember, the march on Bloody Sunday was the only one of that size ever to happen within a no-go area during that time. The Bloody Sunday march was the biggest ever. There was never another march inside the no-go area like that there. Such was the feeling against internment. There was a whole build-up, from 68, and because everything was going on, because the way NASAs were being treated. But internment was the last straw. The last time I saw Wally that day, we were coming down Southway, and I was a long way. My friends and all. Our Wally there's trees at the bottom of Southway. Wally was up there. His footage proves what I seen because the march, he films the march coming down that part of Southway. There's another part that shows you the march going up Weston Street. The last piece is the gas coming on. Wherever he was or whatever happened, the cameras put away in.
How did you hear that your brother was one of the victims?
After the shooting, he called my wife, Grady. We made our way up, and there was evening mass then, on Sunday. We made our way up to her house. She lived in Craig Heights. We're from Westway, about a mile apart. The day before, there was two people out of our square in Westway shot that Saturday. Peter Robson, Peter McLaughlin. We went up to Grady's house, we got our tea. We went to mass. There was a fellow, Pat Clark, coming out behind me, coming out of the chapel after mass. It was Pat Clark that told me father and told the family about Wally. He said, but I hadn't got the heart to come and say it. He said, I didn't know if you knew or not. That was after mass. When we come out of mass, I said, they told Grady, I need to get home to let my mother and father know that I'm okay. When we were approaching the house, I saw Father McLaughlin's car, one of the priests, the Willow Craig Chapel. I said, there must be something wrong with Peter McLaughlin and Peter Robson, their father McLaughlin's car. And as we went into our house, my father met me, he says, Willie's dead. And dropped him in here, just, you know. My mother was sitting in the sitting room and butts everybody around her. The following morning, my father awakened me. I am crying. I never heard anyone cry as sore ever in my life. The older brother George was trying to console him, you know.
Willie was the eldest.
Willie was the eldest, of 11. It just wrecked him, you know.
You were all in shock and you were trying to prepare the funerals and all the other funerals in the city. And did it take you some weeks really to realise what they were saying, or did you know immediately about the lies that were coming out?
Everybody was in shock. We were all in shock. I have a vague memory of listening to a report on the news that night. And I think it was going something like, you know, British Army engaged in the combat with IRA. Fuck off, you know. But it's what they did.
How have you managed to keep up your spirits and your fight over the years?
What they did was wrong and they just can't get away with it. Very simple, you know. There was a number of us in the campaign who were sort of hard-nosed on it, you know. There was no shifting us, you know. Jerry and John and myself, and who practically, you know, led the thing. And it would have been so wrong to you know, it would have been so wrong to let them away with it. It was wrong. It shouldn't have happened.
But it's been so many years, and did you ever kind of feel that you were losing the fight? In yourself, I mean.
I was a step forward and 2 steps back. You know, when we started the campaign, it was going to the snail's piss, you know. We thought, we're not getting anywhere here. And sometimes something would have happened, and it went very, very slow. But the determination was there among us. It was there, and we just kept going and going and going. We met every Tuesday night up in West End Park for nearly 7 years.
From when?
92. Campaign started in 92. The peace process was starting to fly at this time. Hume was very hard to pin down. I suggested we got after Hume. I thought, right, there was a postcard campaign. We were out getting everybody to sign it, post them off to Downing Street. John Major was sitting there. Postcards were flying off. I remember I stole an idea from the police commander of the Bog and the Roswell Flats in Andy St. Columns, Wales, where my aunt lived. And they put in the wonders at 3 o'clock in the morning. Within a month, relatives from the Roswell Street Flats and the St. Columns, Wales, went to London. I took that idea. I said, right, let us go to London. Let's take it to their front door. But the only way we could do that was through Hume. We needed Hume to get into London. He got us on the Downing Street, and he got us in front of so many MPs and at Westminster. That was a big PR stunt for us.
And what year was that?
I would guess maybe around 94.
So would you kind of have, you know, you'd have something big would happen and then it would all die away again, and you'd have to come up with some other idea?
That's the way it happened.
Yeah.
But us getting on the Downing Street, us being seen on Downing Street, I believe, was sending a firm message out. These people are serious.
Patricia went over and got at the Kew Gardens and got the HO219 file. There were documents lodged with the Public Records Office at the conclusion of the Widgery inquiry, and many of these documents were never disclosed to the lawyers representing the families in 72. So, what we did was we prepared an analysis of what could have been done had there been fair disclosure at the time. You know, it wasn't just it was a tribunal inquiry whereby there was a cosy fireside chat, and we unearthed the minutes of the meeting between Edward Heath, Lord Widgery, and Lord Carrington, in which Heath reminded Widgery that the Northern Ireland were not just fighting a military war, we're fighting a propaganda war. and Patricia found this minute. There was explosive stuff.
Right.
And it told a story that this wasn't just a substantively corrupt inquiry that was happening, because it was a matter of urgent public importance. There was an outcry. The difference was with Bloody Sunday, they did it in front of the media. The media were there. There was hundreds of photos, hundreds upon hundreds of photos.
And they never interviewed them, the photographers?
Very few of them. Very, very few. They almost had to push their way in to get interviewed. But Fulvio Grimaldi was able to be smuggled out of Derry that night with his films by Martin McGuinness. As it turned out, many years later, Martin got him over the border and got him to Dublin, himself and Susan North. And Fulvio's photos, along with another French photojournalist called Gilles Perez. So the photographs were coming out, and all these victims, none of them were armed. And they couldn't have shot more innocent people in Derry. I mean, there's plenty of people they could have shot, and people would have went, well, maybe, you know. But
And do you think without those photographs?
I think that's the trouble that that's the trouble that the Ballymurphy families had. They had no photos.
Yeah.
The difference with Bloody Sunday, what made it unique was it was done in front of the media. And if they hadn't had the media to go back, because the media gave lie to the British Army's account, and we had it so through the material that Patricia uncovered when she came over the queue, and she also obtained the military statements that were made by the Paras on the night of Bloody Sunday and the next day and then the next day. And none of these statements were ever disclosed to the family, to the lawyers for the families. All they got were statements taken weeks later by the Treasury Solicitors Department. We felt that it won't have the same weight if it's just a report from Madden and Finucane or from Seamus Tracy or from our team. So what we did was, and Patricia went down on Boxing Day, I think it was 1995, and she went down to Galway, and she briefed a legal professor in Galway called Dermot Walsh. And she went down and she spent the entire Boxing Day briefing him, and he agreed to prepare an analysis of what could have been done if there had been a fair show, well, you know, on an even playing field. But with all these things and with the Walsh report, we were then able to go down, meet the Taoiseach and Eamon O'Crieve and the Department of Foreign Affairs came on board in a very big way, because they could see that we would get stuff ourselves, and they could see the blatant unfairness. And the Irish government then produced a report which was served on the British government at Downing Street, and it was the Irish government's assessment of the new material.
That was just for an oral inquiry.
And at that stage, it was becoming explosive stuff, and it was gathering a great pace.
Oh, absolutely.
That got us along to coming up to about 98.
Right.
In January 98, and that's when, you know. There was only about 3 months left of negotiations, you see, for the Good Friday Agreement. Tony Blair was in place, and Martin McGuinness impressed very, very heavily on, like, you need to sort out Bloody Sunday.
Yeah.
You need to sort out Bloody Sunday. And we were all up in Craigan.
We went over and we met Mo.
Yes, she was very good.
That was, in fact, we flew out of Dublin going over. We met Mo, and we were letting her, she knew what we were after. We were after an international inquiry.
The Irish government were solidly behind it by that stage.
I talk about a time we were up and down in Dublin squeezing the Emmons, and they were getting on board, definitely. Yeah. Within a month, New Labour were in. If that hadn't happened, we probably might not have got an inquiry. We went over and we met Mo. John Kelly, we were only a small group. John was chair, I was vice chair, you know. But the contact was made with John. I can't mind who it was. Somebody contacted John and says, right, he's getting something. He's not getting what he's want. But what he's getting, he should be happy with. He's getting a Brit and 2 Commonwealth judges. And there was stuff going on. We was just like, well, that's not what we want. What are we going to do with it? One thing or another. And I think the feeling was, if this is all we're getting, we still have to run with it. It's better than nothing. So we run with it. And how long have we run? 5 years?
Well, of oral evidence, evidence gathering and oral evidence had went for 5 years. There was
About 7 years to get the report out.
It took 12. 12 and a half, actually.
And then there was a scandal over the amount of money that it cost.
Yes, but it did cost a lot of money. But you have to remember, the British Army took a judicial review, saying that that their soldiers were under such that. Now they always say giving evidence day and daily at the time. The other soldiers in trials here, in the block trials, would have been given evidence day and daily, and they brought a judicial review in London, challenging. Firstly, they had a successful challenge against the inquiry in relation to anonymity.
There's 5 of them, no?
Yeah.
And Savile never won one.
Savile never won one judicial review taken in London by the former soldiers, put it that way. Firstly, anonymity. Savile ruled they should give evidence in their own names, and with their own identities. That was held to be unreasonable and unlawful. Then the next big challenge came because Savile said that all hearings should be, and naturally in Derry. I mean, they weren't in Derry the first time; they were in Coleraine, and that was very deliberate, and that was to cause a massive chill factor to prevent local eyewitnesses from coming forward, because we're going into a very hostile loyalist area. Right. They go 30 miles away. They go down, and they were met with mobs, and etc. and barely protected. It was very traumatic for people already traumatized to go down and do it. So it was a very deliberate thing. But Savile said, "Look, it's happened here. Every other inquiry takes place in the place where it occurred. That should happen here again. That was ruled to be." Unreasonable and unlawful, challenged successfully by way of judicial review, again in the London High Court. Now, those two decisions ended up costing the inquiry, or costing the public person an absolute fortune, because they had to run effectively 2 inquiries that were going in tandem. Because you see, all the time that we were in England, well, there was the venue, firstly, where it had to take place, but everything was still being back to Derry. And all the lawyers and the teams and the families. I mean, over 100 of you flying every week over to London. Every week.
For 2
every
and a half
single
years.
week for 2 years.
For 2 years.
Yeah.
And do you see the cost of that? Anonymising all those documents.
Yeah.
So, and doing it right. Now, it was always going to be an expensive affair. But that really sent the cost spiralling out of control, and it's often slagged, it's often criticised for what it cost, but it's very rarely understood what the causes of that. And those were those were fairly significant factors.
And what was it like when you eventually got that report in 2010?
It was good.
It was a momentous day.
Oh, absolutely! It was brilliant. It was, it was for David Cameron. They come out, maybe an hour or more, or whatever, dedicated to Bloody Sunday. For him, they say what he said. Unjustified and unjustifiable. I didn't need him to tell me that. No, nobody in this town needed it. We didn't need the Brits to tell us that. They needed it. But for him to do it, we forced him into it.
And did that not feel like a win, and that it was the end?
No, it was never going to be the end. No. The postcard campaign was, we had 3 demands on it. The repudiation of witchery, the declaration of innocence, and the prosecution of them responsible.
That was the third bit.
That day, 2 of the 3 demands had been won.
No, we were going all right.
You had 2 people winged at 5-4. And it's commonly believed that the reason why those 2 people were shot were to draw the IRA down, to hit back, and to engage them in a firefight, and to wipe them out, with overwhelming firepower. But they didn't come down. There was a shot fired in return at them from an official IRA gunman, and he almost got badly hurt in a fist fight with provisionals who tried to take the weapon off him. There was, there was that. And then when they came in at 4:10, by 4:30, everybody was dead. the three bodies were in the back of the pig, and they were moving back out with about 50 people arrested. Who went through a horrendous time of it just across the way there in Fort George that night. Because after they were finished shooting people there, they came down and started physically torturing those people who were arrested. And, you know, it's often forgotten, like the horrific time of it that those people...
Spitting in prisoners' mouths.
Soldier F went out of control that night.
Alsatian dogs, putting Alsatian dogs on them.
He attacked in particular a Catholic priest called Father Terence O'Keefe, who was the Dean of Humanities.
That just happened 100 yards down there. Just down there, Fort George.
And that's when that's where we got his name.
Right.
That's where we got his name that night.
Because how he behaved, basically.
Because he had identified himself and Father O'Keefe wrote a letter, and his name was actually published in the Irish press, naming him way back, you know. And you know, the press reports are there to this day. But we knew his name before they had left Glenfadda Park, because his best friend Soldier G came in after shooting the two people in Abbey Park and said, "I got another one." He'd actually got two, but there was a shoot through. And we said, well, P.S. I haven't even been in touch. We better write to the Chief Constable. So we wrote him this stinger of a letter, and then we made submissions in relation to each and every client that we had. I said, "What are you going to do about this one? What are you going to..." So he got hit by 27 letters. And he said,
Murder investigations.
Murder investigations, better start here.
Yeah.
And so they drafted an ex-police who were off with their patent retirement money, and they came back in to investigate this about very, very bad misgivings about this because of where they had come from. So we're going to have to stay on this like a hawk. The next thing was, sorry, we're going to have to shelve the Bloody Sunday murder investigation because we don't have the money. So we did what we do best. We took another judicial review about the fate.
So what year are you at there?
We're at about 2015.
15.
About 2015, because remember we went over to Maydown and had a very hot and heavy meeting with myself, yourself, Fergal, Peter, and John, and the five of us with senior police, and they came out with their ears dinging and threats of going to court, and they looked at us, and we were in court by Tuesday, and the court's held for us. It's a complete breach of Article 2 of the Convention, not to get
so the court's basically told them
every time we had to go back to the court.
Yeah.
Every time we had to go back to the court. And then, so the money was found. And then the next thing, they arrest Soldier G. He's the first one to be arrested. And they
started bringing them over again, didn't they?
So they then started reviewing them all voluntary attendances for murder. The most important part about the committal proceedings has been the hearsay applications, which were brought by the PPS, which put Soldier F basically inside the kill zone of Glenfadda Park, armed with his SLR, firing at civilians. The civilian evidence really takes care of itself. You know, the civilian evidence is all held up. But it's the hearsay evidence. If those applications had been unsuccessful, the case would have been killed dead Friday week ago. We went to court. The judge held in favour of the PPS. I think I was asked, well, I mean, what are your views as to today? I said, well, it's a very bad day for Soldier F. You know, because one thing's clear now, that this judge is going to return him for trial, and he's going to then be in the Crown Court, and he'd be tried before a diplock judge in a diplock court sitting without a jury, and those applications will have to be heard for real, as it were, in the Crown Court. And if hearsay evidence is accepted, then I mean Soldier F's in a world of trouble. He's currently charged with the murder of Willie, the murder of Jim Ray, the attempted murders of Patsy O'Donnell, Joe Friel and Joe Mahan. And that's only a fraction of the people he shot that day. You know, he's only standing trial for a fraction of what he did. And then he went down and started torturing people. I mean torturing. You know, making them stand in front of gas heaters until they collapsed, beating a priest very badly. And then a number of days later, he's involved in another incident in West Belfast where they pick up 2 Catholic men, take them away in pigs, drop them in the Shankill Road, identify them as Catholics. The men survive, and very, very few people did. And those men were paid heavy damages, and we were able to cross-examine F about the kidnapping that occurred within a couple of days of the 2 Catholics in Belfast. You know, I don't think he was a psychopath out of control. He's very, very well liked. He was a very popular soldier, and you can see the campaign that's behind him. You know, to this day, he's a very popular soldier throughout, and he's a very well-known soldier throughout the British Army, and he has received a backing that no other soldier who's faced charges here has ever had, like a personal backing. That's very, very obvious. Even done to go to the highest level a non-commissioned officer can rise to, the warrant officer classes high. That's a ceiling he went to within the army. But he's a very significant soldier.
Will you go to court every day?
I never miss it. I'm going to go to Belfast, I'll be on, and hopefully the rest of them be up there too. No, you can't miss it. You know, it's such a got it here, you know. If he's going to be in Belfast, no matter where he is, if he's in court, I'm going to be here. He's going to see me.
Was Willie's camera ever found?
It's in the museum. You'll see it tomorrow in the museum.
And was there any photographs taken?
You'll see it tomorrow too, yeah.
Right. You've been listening to Crime World, a podcast from SundayWorld.com, produced by Ian Mullaney and edited by me, Nicola Tallant. Research assistant is Claude Amini. If you like this show and love true crime, leave us a review, or why not download the free SundayWorld.com app for lots more stories from Ireland and across the globe.
My name is John Kelly. I am the brother of Michael Kelly, 17 years old, who was murdered on Bloody Sunday. I was with Michael after he was shot. I helped to carry him and place him in the ambulance just outside and take him to the hospital. I was in the mortuary afterwards, seeing the dead bodies, 9, 10 dead bodies and so on. But then we arrived home and my mother was sitting waiting. And the house was packed with people. And she was sitting waiting over. And we walked in and she got up and I said, "Ma'am, Michael's dead." My father, he arrived over and I could still see him sliding down the wall when we told him Michael had been shot dead. All this is still embedded in there, never left. And that's the incredible thing about it too as well. We remember everything, whereas the Paris remember nothing. Especially Soldier F, who murdered Michael.
Last year, the people of Derry marked the 50th anniversary of the Bloody Sunday massacre. The brutal attack by the British Army on unarmed protestors left 14 people dead and has been a source of anger and grief in the city for over half a century. Now, for the first time, following a 30-year campaign by the victims' families, one of the soldiers involved in the killings is facing trial for the murders of 2 young men and the attempted murders of 3 more. I went to Derry recently to meet those families, to visit the Museum of Free Derry, and to see for myself the streets where the killing happened. In this episode, I'm talking to John Kelly, the brother of Michael Kelly, who was killed aged just 17 during Bloody Sunday. John shows me around the Museum of Free Derry where he works and tells me about the museum's origins and purpose. He also talks movingly about the impact of his brother's death on him and his family over the last 50 years. I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're listening to Crime World.
So it's really interesting. I mean, you might as well tell us about this place.
But the museum itself?
Yeah, tell us
Yeah,
about
of
the
course,
museum
no
and
problem
when,
at all.
you know, when it opened, how you collected up the stuff and what feedback you get.
Well, actually, I stemmed from the Bloody Sunday issue because part of the campaign that we conducted for many, many years, we eventually got a new inquiry into Bloody Sunday, the second inquiry. And we set up a building in the city centre beside the Guildhall. And it was a Bloody Sunday Trust who were responsible for this building. And at that time, I had my own job. I'm an engineer by trade. But then a job came along, family liaison worker, they called it, and I applied and got the job. And one of the first tasks we were given was to set up this building in the city centre because what the inquiry did, they set up a live link between both. So that people could come into the building and they could sit down and watch what was happening on television. Mm-hmm. And we're talking about the family members, who didn't want to go over to the Guildhall and sit in the atmosphere and listen to the evidence. So we set it up in such a way with a private area for the families. Then we brought in counselling services too as well to support the families because they were enduring the evidence on a daily basis, more or less the last moments of their loved ones' lives and so on, but also to help witnesses, civilian witnesses. Ciarán and Madam Finnegan, they were upstairs and they represented the majority of the families. But then we had a space down and was decided then to set up an exhibition area. And what it was simply made up of was a television screen, a slide presentation, and a few photographs, and so on. That's what we set up. And believe it or not, we were in that building for 7 years, for the duration of the inquiry. And the guy who owned the building, he gave it to us, the trust, free of charge. But when the inquiry came to an end, he decided he wanted to sell it. So he had to go. And we found a place around the corner in Foyle Street and was upstairs. And we reset the exhibition. And people were coming in on a steady basis, during the inquiry and also in this other place we were in. But what happened then was that members of the trust decided to find a location to set up the museum. The idea came into their head because of the exhibition area and the fact that the public were so interested in it. And we searched and we found a place just here. And what it actually was 3 old age pensioners' flats. And they were lying empty, dormant. But the thing about them, they were a centre for antisocial behaviour, drinking, drugs and so on. A lot of young ones were hanging about it and so on, So they bought it over for a small price, whatever it was. And we moved in and we knocked the building on the one to create the first Museum of Free Derry. And we were in that place for 9 years. And what we found, it was very, very popular. People were coming to the city, but also visiting us as well. I said about the map earlier on there. We had a map. I had a map behind the reception area. And when we moved out of that old place, I had 120 pins in that map from different nationalities from all over the world. So in other words, we're coming from everywhere to visit the museum. And what you find, even the artefacts downstairs and so on, they were actually donated by family members, by the public. Because what is happening these days is, or even a long time ago, people were dying off. And when people go in to rent out their houses, so they find these wee bits and pieces, and they were actually giving them to us. And eventually we built up a collection, and we're still collecting. We're still collecting, even to this very day. And as I said, we set it up in such a way it was visitor friendly. They could walk around the place and just watch up. But most of it was photographs and reading and so on, Plus artefacts, a few artefacts, that's what we had. I'll give you an example. The banner downstairs, the Civil Rights banner, was carried on Bloody Sunday. Okay, that's the blood-stained banner. It carries the blood of Barney McGuigan. And that banner itself, we didn't know it existed. And this is a wee bit of a story behind how the artefacts came about. But we got a call to visit a guy called Johnny Bond, and he was the husband of Bridget Bond, who was one of the civil rights leaders in the city, you know. And what was happening, his house was being renovated. And he had the banner, which no one knew it existed. But what he did, he gave it to the Derry City Council as safekeeping while the house was being renovated. So we became very interested in it and we wanted to see it. So we approached the council and we seen it for the first time in the council offices on top of a large table. And we said it was ours. You know, because one of the family members' blood was on it and so on. But the council wanted to keep it. So they set it up in the Tower Museum just across the street. But it was in a small area hanging from two bits of thread inside this glass case. And we weren't too happy with that, you know. And we approached the council and we said, we want it back. It belongs to us. So at the end of it, we came to an agreement between the Derry City Council and the Trust. Derry City Council owns the banner. We keep it. And that's why it's downstairs. It's like the jackets, the old people who were shot on Bloody Sunday. The families kept those for years. And when we approached them, they were prepared to hand it over. You might see a baby grow downstairs. That little baby grow has my brother's blood on it. When my mother was alive, she kept everything belonged to Michael. His clothes, half-eaten whole nut bar. I have a Mars bar. So we're 51 years old. When Michael was alive, he had a sweet tooth. So my mother would have bought him a couple of bars of chocolate on a Sunday because he used to travel to Belfast and he was attending the Technical College in Belfast. He never got a chance to eat the Mars bar. So I have a Mars bar, so we're 51 years old. But when my mother was alive, she said that anything belonging to Michael would go with her when she died. So the morning she was getting buried, I put everything I thought into the coffin. And away she went. And a couple of weeks afterwards, I was searching my wardrobe. And there I found the baby grow. For somehow or other, it got separated from the rest of the clothes. But I intentionally kept the Mars bar, but not the baby grow. So there's still something belonging to Michael downstairs. So all those artifacts were handed over, and as I said, by the family members. And some of them kept the possessions of all of the people, their loved ones, but others got destroyed them or done something with them, you know. But we were lucky they kept some. So we were in that building for 9 years, and eventually it was overcome by dampness. So it was decided to demolish the old building, rebuild. So we're here just 6.5 years now. It actually cost £2.4 million. And you couldn't put this place anywhere else. Bloody Sunday happened just outside the door. It happened just outside the door. And the fact that we can actually point out where people died and where the story is, and that's more or less my job, along with the others, that we tell the story, the true story about what happened. So that's what we do here. But what it is a place of education. We're here to tell a story. We're totally independent and we're not affiliated to any organisation. Actually, the Irish government actually helped to fund this new build here.
How many years after Bloody Sunday did your mother die?
My mother died in 2004. So that was, many years is that? 32 years. 32
so
years.
all that way she carries the
She
grief for your
was there at the
brother.
beginning of the second inquiry. She actually marched along with Mrs. McKinney and all. There's photographs down there. And they marched to the Guildhall at the beginning of the inquiry, but they never seen the end.
Would she have been on the march?
No. No, I'm telling a lie in such a way. My mother didn't march as such that day. What she did, believe it or not, she tried to follow Michael and keep an eye on him. And the reason why she did it was when Michael, she was more possessive of Michael. I come from a big family. I had 9 sisters and 2 brothers, Michael being one of the brothers. But Michael was a young boy at 3 years old. He took a virus that went to his brain. And he went into a coma for 3 weeks. And he nearly died. Actually, she tells a story about one of the local priests coming in there and saying to her, Mrs. Kelly, give him up to God. And she refused to do it. And he survived. He came around. So on the day of the march, he actually approached her and asked her for permission to go on the march. Could you imagine that nowadays? A 17-year-old asked his mother, sorry, I go out, but it's a respect within the family. That's the way we were brought up. And she says no initially. But through persuasion, like myself and the sisters, making him out by Mammy's boy, she allowed him to go. The last time I seen Michael was at the beginning of the march, and I advised him to be careful and so on, you know. But what she did was she followed him tried to follow him. And she lost sight of him. And she went to, her sister lived in a flat down the street there, down in Abbey Park, isn't it? Abbey Park, aye. And she has an upper floor flat. And my mother went into the house, into her flat, and she was looking out the window to see if she could see Michael. And she did actually see him at one point, and she shouted because she was inside. He didn't hear because of the noise and so on. And he ran towards the barricade. But while she was looking out that window, the paratroopers moved in. Yeah. And actually, the killer of her son fired the shot from below her feet. She was up there, and he was down here along his comrades. There's a little tipper wall down the street there, you can still see it. And they were in behind that wall. And my mother was there, and the likes of E, F, G, and H and so on. They landed at this wall, and F fired the shot that killed her son. My mother was there. But she wouldn't have known. She wouldn't have known, you know. So after a while, and actually one of the paratroopers, because they were standing at the window shouting out at them, fired a rubber bullet through the window. And actually part of the glass went into my cousin's eye, and she didn't go to the hospital till later on at night or something like that. But my mother went home, and she was told that Michael had been shot. But it was fine, he was shot in the ankle. He was okay. But while in between times we were over in the hospital, I was with Michael after he was shot. I helped to carry him and place him in the ambulance just outside and take him to the hospital. I was in the mortuary afterwards, seeing the dead bodies, 9, 10 dead bodies and so on. But then we arrived home, and my mother was sitting waiting. And the house was packed with people, and she was sitting waiting over. And we walked in, and she got up, and I said, "Ma'am, Michael's dead." Bedlam. She tells a story, and she doesn't remember anything for a long time, but because directly afterwards she was useless to herself. She couldn't even look after herself or look after the children. So some of the older girls had to move back into the house again to look after her and the younger girls. But some of the stories, you know, that it's been told about her. For instance, on the night that Michael got out of the hospital and he was laid out in his wee coffin in his bedroom, myself and a few others were sitting in the room with Michael, and all of a sudden my mother came busting through the door. Now, my mother was less than 5 foot, wee red-haired woman. And she went to the coffin and lifted Michael out, crying, "Michael's son, Michael's son." And we had to restrain her and put Michael back in. She didn't remember doing that. And even afterwards, when my mother was a very religious woman, she went to Mass every day. But part of her routine then was going to the graveside. And there was just one particular day that there was snow on the ground, and she was seen walking towards the cemetery with a blanket under her arm. And a woman approached her and asked her, "Mrs. Kelly, where are you going with the blanket?" She says, "Well, Michael will be cold." Taking her where he put up where his grave to keep him warm. Downtown, she would have, I've seen a young fellow with long hair, she would have walked over and touched his hair and stuff, all that there. But she had no memory of all that stuff. But thank God she survived in 2004. She took ill, and she took a couple of strokes. She was bedridden, couldn't get out of her bed. And there's this one day I went up. She always asked about what was happening down at the inquiry, because she was there at the beginning, but she didn't see any of the rest of it. And I told her one day, they were all declared innocent. Told her a lie. It's a piece of fire. And she says, "That's grand, son." She went away happy. So that's the story behind my mother. So, and she always said, you know, one of the links of the chain was taken out by Michael being killed and murdered that day.
Did you get counselling, John?
Me? No. This is my counselling. So talking to people that come and all, you know. You know what I'm saying?
That image of going into the hospital and seeing all the bodies in the morgue.
I'm sitting here talking to you, and I can see it. I can still see it. I can still see, even within the hospital, the doctor and the nurse approaching us after we brought Michael in, and them declaring him dead and so on. Walking around the hospital afterwards, paratroopers walking about with their weapons, laughing and joking with each other and so on. All the people all around the place all crying. But I actually talked to some of the individual people who were injured that day. I remember that well. My father, he arrived over, and I could still see him sliding down the wall when we told him Michael had been shot dead. All this is still embedded in there. It's never left. And that's the incredible thing about it too as well. We remember everything, whereas the Paras remember nothing. Especially Soldier F, who murdered Michael. Don Mullen tells a story that when he was in the room, when he was given evidence, Soldier F was given evidence, in nearly 500 occasions, he said he took note. He didn't recall or didn't remember. This is a good guy. 5 people murdered. Attempted murder of 6 others, and said he didn't remember anything at all. So it's still there. It always will be.
And how do you feel about the trial, the upcoming trial?
It's something we worked hard for. We worked hard for. It's just a pity we only got the one. You know, there were 18 involved in it. 7 of them are dead. There's still 11 there. But the way we can only console ourselves, if we get him for one, we get him for everybody.
And have you seen him?
Oh, yeah. And when he was given evidence at the inquiry in London, now that we had to go to London to hear their evidence because we were afraid to come back to Derry. They feared for their lives. So we sat in the same room as him and we listened to him and watched him, and it showed absolutely no remorse for what he did. None at all. Didn't give a damn. Every one of them were the same. Not one of them were any different. It was nice. But we did it because we knew we had to do it. That week alone was the biggest week of family members travelling to London to hear the evidence of the soldiers. So he sat and lied to his teeth. But it was worth it. It's a long journey. We're still at
It's
it.
been a really long journey, and all these years later, you know, I suppose, I don't know whether you can explain in words the effects that Michael's death had on your wider family. Obviously, your mother was hugely affected by it. I'm sure you all were.
You see, at the time, when something like this here happened, you were just told to get on with it. There was no such thing as counselling or help in those days. Although my mother ended up in the asylum for a while too as well.
Sure, they gave them tablets, didn't they?
Yeah, something like that there. And as I say, my mother at the time, Michael, during the week, she never enough for 5 days. She was you know, totally pulled up, if you want to call it. She should have slept for a week, but she didn't. So it was down to the families themselves and the individuals they supported and the community, because there's no help out there for any way whatsoever. So my mother dealt with it her way. My father dealt with it his way too as well, you know. Actually, when he died in 1991, you know, he said very little. But we found afterwards, have you ever known a wallpaper, a sample books? Yeah. No, big thick books. We found one of those, and inside was cuttings about Bloody Sunday and all. We didn't know he was doing that. He was actually doing this sort of thing in his own way.
Hiding them.
Yeah, he was dealing with it in his own way, you know, and dealing with it. But what people tried to do was get on as best they could with their own lives. So, like my mother and father, they dealt with everything at the time, you know, about going to meetings and all the legalities of it and stuff like that there. I was just there in the background. But then when my father died in 1991, then the campaign started in 1992, I stepped in. I always question myself, if my father had been still alive at the time, what would I have done? I don't know. But they dealt with everything right up to 1992, my mother and my father, you know, so they had their own ways in those days. So every family can tell a different story, but the story's still the same. They all suffered equally.
Your mother had a premonition that day, or was she always over sort of protective?
Overprotective of him, you know, as I said. But in saying that, my mother and father would have been fair to every one of us. If one got a sweet, they all got a sweet. And if one got a pair of socks, next week the other one got a pair of socks. This is the way it worked. Yeah. Because there were very little money in those days, you know. Mm-hmm. And that's just the way it was, and that's the way we were brought up. Big family.
They used to describe what she went through as they'd gone mad with grief.
Oh, most definitely. My mother never got over his death. He always even to the day she died, she had a photograph of him beside her, you know, all the time. Talked about him all the time and so on. Like, there were stories when he was alive, he used to rear pigeons, you know, and he put him away in Belfast. He was trying to become a sewing machine mechanic, and he had pigeons in the backyard. And my mother actually helped him to build a loft for the pigeons. But when he came back, that Saturday, he had to go to work. And he worked away down in Maydown, about 6 miles from here. But he used to take the pigeons down to Maydown and release them. And my mother had to stand at the loft waiting for them to arrive before she went back into the house again. That's the sort of thing, that's the sort of thing he did, And then she had a girlfriend, he was going steady at the time. It's just a normal guy. A normal young fella, never in trouble, totally non-political. Just that he went to the march that day for the crack, and that's what happened.
And do you enjoy working here and meeting people and explaining to them?
Yeah. It was an important part of the process here too as well. That, as I said earlier on, the museum is about education, about telling the story. Although yesterday I had an individual was on here yesterday, and she more or less said to me that, do you not think what you're doing is dragging up the past all the time? And the only way I can answer that is we're not dragging up the past. What we're doing is educating. People should learn from our story, and hopefully it will never happen again. This is why we do it, So everybody works on here, they all enjoy it. If that's the right word. We're here to do a job. And I've been doing it for a long time.
And I suppose, kind of, you're sort of setting out the truth really here, aren't you? Because that's what's so important about all this, the lies that were told all along and from the beginning.
We don't hide from the truth. We tell it what's no.
Michael's was one of the cases in which they used, this sham forensics, to blacken them, and that was one of the the things that we really set out to dismantle, and like the so-called paraffin test. They called the sodium rhodizonate test. It wasn't even. It simply tested for lead, and lead is only one of cartridge discharge residue. It's there are five elements to it. It's like lead, barium, and antimony, and etc. And only tested for lead. Jim Ray, he was a gunman. He worked as a welder. Michael, he was up in Belfast doing this at the tech, studying. Other people were painters, mechanics. Mechanics. Everyone did lead paint in those days. But the forensics was Barney McGuigan. That was one of the worst sort of obscenities. There was a scarf used to. He was left with a very, very horrific wound after they shot him, and that was sort of wrapped around his face, wasn't it, just to give him some sort of dignity. And Widgery's, so obviously the scarf, I think, went down along with the remains to the hospital that was taken, and they said that the scarf was used to wrap up a pistol that had recently been fired. And it just was just the worst obscenity ever. But we absolutely took those forensics apart. To the stage that where Christopher Clark, the counsel of the tribunal, he said to Dr. John Martin, wasn't it? Had somebody got to you? And that was a good day. We had some great days too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, some beautiful days, cracker days.
And if as bad as it was, we gave him an awful hammering, and it was a good day.
No, it was brilliant. I was relieved to see it over, to be truthful,
Aye.
Because I remember that morning, see the first time he was to appear that morning.
You were very wound up.
Oh, I actually went down on my knees. We were staying in a hotel in London, and I went down on my knees and prayed before it, and I never do that, just to give me the strength to get through it. But one of the things that did happen, I don't know if you know about it, when we went on to settle, I couldn't get into the family area. It was jammed, the place was packed. So I had to go into the public area.
200 people.
Yeah, I had to go into the public area.
City.
Couldn't get in. And my job, family liaison worker, was to look after the families whenever we went to London or anywhere we went. And this girl came up to me and she said to me, one of the families, she says, look, John, there's something happening out there, somebody's bag or something. They used to know the security and blah, blah, blah. They wouldn't let him through with his bag. I says, okay, I'll go out and sort it. So I got up, they step out. Big Jerry Duddy, another family member, says, sit you down. This is your day. I'll deal with that. So we were there for each other. We were there to support each other. Definitely. But that was... It was encouraging that day, to say the least, when he was giving evidence, But it was hard to sit and watch him.
I'm sure it was.
They watched his, not only what it looked like,
It was 2 full days.
yeah, 2 full days it was.
But his attitude.
His attitude is, and he didn't, he didn't give a damn. He was so, to me, he was so small and insignificant.
Thanks, John.
No problem at all.
Thank you, John.
You've been listening to Crime World, a podcast from SundayWorld.com, produced by Ian Mullaney and edited by me, Nicola Tallant. Research assistant is Claude Amini. If you like this show and love true crime, leave us a review, or why not download the free SundayWorld.com app for lots more stories from Ireland and across the globe.